Hashtag psychotherapy unfogged with Mark Fielding.
Hello, and welcome to Hashtag Psychotherapy Unfogged, Season 6, Episode 9. As you know, I'm Mark Fielding, psychotherapist, relationship counsellor, and ADHD coach. Regular listeners will know that it's been quite a while, 3 months in fact, since Joe and I put out a show. Joe and I have had a lot going on in our own lives, which we'll probably get into, as we move forwards into the series. So we have had to take a bit of a break, but we are back now. We've got an excellent guest today, and we've got some excellent guests lined up. So we will be starting to produce the podcast a little bit more regularly. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce Paul Symes. I generally ask our guests to kind of send me something around the introduction and how I introduce them. And Paul sent me something really, really great. So I'm just going to read it basically for our listeners. So here goes. Yeah. So my name is Paul Symes, and I created Reconnection because I believe we all carry within us the possibility of wholeness. I'm a trauma-informed transformative coach and a humanistic integrative counselor in training, currently completing a diploma in integrative humanistic counselling. But more than any title or qualification, I'm someone who has lived through trauma, anxiety, addiction, and recovery, and who knows the long, uneven road back to authenticity. Over the years, I've trained alongside therapists and clinicians on the Voyage Trauma Informed Care Program, a powerful integration of neuroscience, somatic trauma work, and internal family systems. My learning has also included polyvagal theory, IFS, EMDR informed approaches, which is where Paul and I met, an ongoing study in integrative humanistic counselling. These trainings have given me a wide toolkit, but they are never a replacement for presence, compassion, and curiosity, the qualities that sit at the heart of my work. This isn't about fixing you, it's about walking with you as you find your way back to your authentic self. I know how isolating it feels to be stuck in patterns of fear, shame, or disconnection. I also know how transformative it can be to have someone alongside you, not to fix you, but to walk with you as you rediscover your own strength, clarity, and self-leadership. Yeah, I really like that term, self-leadership. That's what reconnection is, a space for life-changing conversations where nervous system awareness, trauma understanding, and human creativity come together in service of growth and healing. My approach is not clinical, though it is deeply informed by clinical wisdom. It is human, relational, and grounded. We may explore the language of the nervous system, the stories you carry, or the parts of yourself that feel hidden or burdened. We may also sit in stillness, use metaphor, or draw from somatic practices to help you return to a sense of safety and possibility. Ultimately, this work is about coming home to your body, your story, and your authentic self. My role is not to lead you, but to walk beside you as you regulate, restore, re-inhabit, reclaim, and reimagine what your life can be. So that's wonderful, Paul. I mean, I always kick off with our guests and just ask a little bit around their kind of personal experiences that led them into the field. So would it be okay if we start there, Paul? I mean, what led you here?
Yeah, sure. I pretty much made the turn about 5 years ago into I went through recovery myself, but that was actually 3 years ago. I'd always been a bit of a seeker, so I'd always been looking outside of myself at the world and how it worked and sort of where I kind of fit within it. But you can read so many self-help books and watch so many podcasts and YouTube videos and follow people because you kind of know things are right, but stepping into living it is a completely different thing. So it was recovery really that has been the catalyst for my redirection of my life.
Mm, mhm,
And that recovery was from alcohol. And I think if you think a certain way and your neural pathways are habitual and your behaviors or your life has kind of compounded over the years to to create the landscape and the life that you're living. It isn't just alcohol. I think when people go through a recovery program like I went through, you're changing essentially the way that you think. It's not only about a surface level habit that sits on top as a kind of protective layer, somewhere to run to, or even if it isn't as destructive as other people's addictions might be on the surface, it's actually a way of thinking that changed for me. So what brought me to this point, I grew up just outside of London, in what really wasn't the most, there's kind of an underlying pressure because, we weren't necessarily rich, and my parents did the very best they could, but I've learned through my trauma training that people talk about big T and small T trauma, that small T trauma can be kind of a death by a thousand cuts, and your parents or your loved ones, your primary caregivers, can have the best of intentions, but they're obviously human and trying to survive too. So the environment that you're growing up in shapes you, and it was challenged. But I think a turning point in our lives came, I was about 14, 15, when my dad got some really bad health news, some quite, destructive health news, although he'd been challenged all the way up to that point with his health, and he was disabled. And at that point, what was essentially a loving family, that I always think of it as, we were all looking in at each other at that point with lots of love, as hard as life was. But at that point, we all kind of turned in a different direction and went into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever the state of mind might be. And it was about survival. And it was at that point that we all kind of went off into the world in different directions. And that's kind of where, for me, whilst there were good times in amongst it, my mindset changed, and I was in survival mode, and therefore habits formed, as did behaviors. And, I wasn't necessarily it was then that we kind of began to move away from a foundation and an authentic self, because I was always quite a bright young boy, whether it be sporty or whether it be academically. And my priorities changed at that point, and it became really about being out in the world and doing what I thought was right, which could be anything from partying to drinking and drugs and everything else that went along with it, when I was in my early 20s. And that kind of formed me, that period, for better or worse. So what brought me to the work really is the realization of that through recovery, that life that had gone on before me.
I mean, if it's okay, Paul, could I just ask you a little bit? I mean, as much as you're happy to talk about your process of recovery, because often recovery is not linear, is it? I mean, we don't have to go into this in a lot of depth, but I mean, could you just say a little bit around your process of recovery and what that looked like?
It was essentially, my program was the 6-week intensive, 2.5 hours of an evening on Zoom for the functional alcoholic. If that's a thing. I was still functioning and needed to hold down a job, as did the other professionals in the room. And it was essentially 4 of the 12 steps of recovery, the fellowship. Outside of that, the 4 steps and the attendance of that 6-week program, you were encouraged to, and I did. I went to AA meetings and found the fellowship and found what that was all about, and by way of support. But really, that recovery period was an opening up. Not only was it abstinence, but it was and the creation of community. I've still got great friends that came out of it too, who we've shared that experience and continue to stay in touch and meet up from time to time. But it was the sharing of your journey. It was the sharing of all the darker secrets. And you talk about anything from how you hurt yourself, but also how you might have hurt the people around you over the course of all those years. And those first 4 steps are really quite profound in the 12-step program, with regard to opening up about situations you may have been in. some really, some dangerous situations. You put yourself at risk when you've got a little bit of a lack of value on your own life,
Mhm.
which I now see I did have. And yeah, that program really was born out of yeah, for, as I say, for the 12 steps, and really the opening up within a group about your journey and about
Yeah.
what drink meant to you and what all aspects of your life kind of meant to you, and the sharing of that. And not only in the sharing of that, you gain the reflection back from the rest of the community that you're in the room with.
Yeah.
Also, in your quieter moments, you reflect, you journal, you look at things, you
Mhm.
break it down,
Mhm.
you realize what's motivating the surface behavior that you're there to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, initially, Paul, was it difficult to open up to the group? I mean, we've done quite a lot of shows on kind of men, and and it's a terrible generalization, but men
Mm.
can internalize quite a lot. I mean, what was your experience of kind of going into a group where the expectancy is you are just going to open up? Was that easy for you to do? Was that difficult at the time?
I was ready to. I went
Yeah.
in as a willing participant, which I think is a really important part of everybody's recovery.
Mm-hmm.
We keep falling down when we don't make a switch in our head because we're not completely in the room for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, I may have found it easier than others because I was used to, potentially in a really dramatic way of explaining it, cried out a few times over the years
Yeah.
and had learnt to communicate my feelings because I've always been that sort of person. Potentially, I was speaking to the wrong people over the years.
Yeah. Okay.
So therefore it wasn't that helpful. But I found it became challenging the deeper you got with regard to how honest you needed to be
Mm-hmm.
about the effect that you'd had on yourself, the world, and who you actually were at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I can see in others, and that's essentially why I'm part of my motivation to be in this work,
Mm-hmm.
is to help others open up where they might be, like my fellow man. Definitely at times I can see needs a little bit of a assistance with regard to opening up.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's obviously there's all sorts of reasons for that, I mean probably,
Mm,
arguably it's maybe changing a bit with, I don't know, with the kind of younger generations, but I think it's still there. There's some of this implicit messaging about, men being strong, not opening up, man up, all all that. I mean, something that you've mentioned just there, but you've also is a big part of your program, I think, is the authenticity.
mm.
I just wonder, you mentioned that in your program, you've just mentioned it there. Why is that? I mean, what is that, Paul, in your program, the authenticity part?
I think some people will call it self.
Yeah.
So some people will call it, your core self. My beliefs over my training, and what just seems logically correct to me, is that at some point there was a core Paul. There was it might have been baby Paul,
Mm.
and we're affected by the world around us, and that
Yeah.
can be trauma, that can be a positive effect, that can be a negative effect.
Yeah.
And when we go into what my journey into a kind of a defense mode, then there's the creation of layers
Mm.
of protective behaviors and habits, and we do all sorts of things maybe to protect ourselves from hurt because we might
Mm.
have experienced something, so therefore it changed our neural
Yeah.
pathways, and our nervous system was affected by it. And there's a great book by Bessel van der Kolk that becomes a little bit of a go-to for me, called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
But essentially over the years, I think you compound those behaviors, and those
Mhm.
habits compound, and it distance you from your authentic self. And for me, my journey is back to who I really am, which at
Mm.
my core,
Mm.
which is my authenticity. So there's living an authentic life, which for me is motivated by an attachment with your core self or your authentic self,
Mm. Mm.
is what I'm doing in keeping with
Mm.
who I want to be and what I want to bring to the world.
Mm. Mhm.
So yeah, that sort of simplifies it because there's many layers and there's
Yeah.
many things to discuss. But
Yeah.
yeah, the authentic seems to be a bit of a buzzword right now for me. authenticity. It seems it's the foundation,
mm, mm.
and from which you then can go forth into the world and
Yeah.
potentially be who you want to be and do some good for others.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, stripping off the layers of masking, I guess we could
Mm,
call it, and just really getting back to your core self, really. Yeah.
yeah,
Could I,
exactly.
could I just ask, what for our listeners that don't really, that don't haven't got a lot of understanding of the field, what is a transformative trauma-informed coach?
Well,
What
that's a
is
little
that?
bit of a
Yeah.
hybrid created title. I'm still working out what I want to call myself. But I sat on, as you explained at the start in my writings there, the
Mm.
Voyage, which is a trauma informed care
Yeah.
course ran by Lula Bentz, who's a very experienced in all aspects of psychotherapy. And that kind of within that came internal family systems, polyvagal theory,
Yeah.
the neuroscience and neuroplasticity,
Hmm.
internal family systems. So I'm trauma informed as a coach.
Mm.
There was I've sat the Animas course and now I've completed that, and
Yeah.
therefore I'm nearly completely a transformative coach.
Hmm.
And what drew me to transformative coaching was that it kind of touches upon bits and pieces around someone's history, and there were touch points between that and the trauma informed care training.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily developmental, even although there's part of it and it's certainly not only performance coaching, which is a
Hmm.
traditional way you might think of coaching. So
Hmm.
transformative coaching kind of took into account the human and the motivations that sit beneath the surface level challenge.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what is a trauma-informed transformative coach? Essentially, that's what I've titled myself at this point, but that could quite easily shorten to human at any point,
Hmm.
just to simplify the matter. And like you mentioned, I'm about to start a diploma in counselling as well,
Hmm.
which takes into about another 3 or 4 words and versions and modalities.
Yeah.
So eventually, I'll have this really long list of title,
Mm.
or it will just be
Mm.
shortened down to
Mm.
human.
Mm. But I guess you'll be able to incorporate the two things really, the kind of coaching and the counselling. So you'll be
Yeah,
able to incorporate. I mean, just looking at your kind of toolbox now, the IFS and the trauma info. I mean, goodness me, you've done a lot already, haven't you? You bring a lot to the work already, and then I guess if you bring the counselling kind of modality in as well. I mean, with me, I've kind of done it the other way around, really. I've done the kind of psychotherapy and the counselling first, and then recently I've just trained to be an ADHD coach, and I can
mm.
really see the benefit of coaching. I mean, I have to say, I mean, I mean, I had business coaching for like about 6 months or something, and it was totally transformative. I mean, I think coaching really, really brings a lot, and I think it's really changing. I
Yeah.
mean, you would know more about coaching than me, but I just get it's very, very dynamic, and I think there's a real place for that actually, and to
I, th-
incorporate both. Yeah,
I kind of think it's just good
yeah,
housekeeping, and you almost
yeah,
think I would say this because I'm creating a business
mm,
that for people to talk. So whether that's coaching or whether you want to call it therapy,
yeah,
it's simply good housekeeping for all humans to connect
mm,
and get essentially another point of view or a reflection on where they're at, because we're all challenged by different things.
yeah,
But what's motivated me to do the coaching course as well as the trauma informed care, which
mm,
is where it kind of began,
mm,
is that through my recovery, firstly, there was that 6 weeks intensive program that I spoke about.
yeah,
So then I kind of felt a bit spat out the other end of that. Okay, so now I've kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. I know more about myself, and I now want to go forth into the world. There was an element of, okay, so now I've got a knowledge of why I did things or where things have come from.
mm,
I kind of probably need some help now with regard to regulating that into a logical path towards where I want to take my life. So there
yeah,
were kind of 3 stages in that. So there was an intensive recovery,
yeah,
there was therapy, and then there was coaching.
yeah,
All of them had different purpose, a different purpose, and were relevant to a different stage in my path to
yeah,
where I am now.
yeah.
The work continues. None of us are complete. The more you
No,
know, the more you realize you don't.
yeah, true.
So for me, what's inspired it is to potentially try and be there for someone all the way through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, okay, so now I've dealt with the destructive behaviors.
Mm.
I realized why. I've dealt with kind of what I've spoke about, where they were coming from and what was empowering them. I put logic around
Yeah.
my feelings and where I came from and where I want to go to. And
Mm.
then there's, okay, so how am I going to get to where I want to go to?
Yeah.
And that's really where the coaching part comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, the two parts really blend. I mean, with, a kind of counseling model, psychodynamic model, we do a lot of kind of looking back
Mm,
and working out what's happened in the past and how that's affecting us now. And of course, that is tremendously important, but often then what? And I think that's when the coaching really comes in. Goals, the just present moment focus, looking at, the kind of life you want to create. For me, I think the two things blend really, really
mm.
well. So this has led you to setting up kind of Reconnect. So that's kind of the name of the business, I guess, is
Yeah,
it?
it's called reconnection because, of course,
Reconnection.
as we established, I'm all about reconnecting with who
Yeah.
you really are, or where your authentic part,
Mm,
so that might inform
mm,
what you want to do with your life, essentially.
mm, mm,
And it's very much in the early stage, like we talk about internal family systems and the knowledge of that. We talk about all these different modalities that I've kind of taken in,
mm,
cranking up my 50-year-old or 53 now brain so that it absorbs all this information is kind of where I'm at.
mm, mm,
We're very much at the beginning of reconnection with regard to what it might be,
mm,
and how it might help people, and how organically it might evolve into whatever it's going to be.
mm,
So at the moment, there's been lots of theory. I have clients of different types,
mm,
but I'm very much at the beginning of my curve,
mm, mm.
and the application of all of those modalities.
We'll put all of your links up with our show notes, but I mean, just for our listeners, if anyone wants to get hold of you, how do they do it? What's the best way to get in touch with you, Paul?
Well, there's an email address there, paul at
Yeah.
re-connection.uk.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there's the website,
Hmm.
www.re-connection.uk.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we'll for our listeners, we'll have all of Paul's links up with our show notes as we normally do.
Or LinkedIn. LinkedIn's there as well.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's probably the easiest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, I mean, your journey, I think in the mental health professions, and I'll probably include myself with this, it's often the case, isn't it? I think we transform our own suffering into helping others, and that is a big part of your story, Paul, I think, isn't it? I mean, you've been through things, you've recovered, and now
Mm.
you're on the other side, and you're trying to, where you are actually bringing that experience and bringing your training into kind of helping others, basically. I mean, that is a really familiar path, I think, in the mental health industry. I mean, have you always been quite interested in, mental health and the mind? And has that been something that's always been of interest to you over the years?
I think without getting,
Yeah,
like, I'm going now into sort of the finer details of the motivations of a human and the human condition.
mm,
I think
yeah,
I've certainly spent most of my life observing
yeah,
and seeing things kind of on a surface level,
mhm,
inspired by those that do make change,
yeah,
and do come from a kind of a compassionate,
mhm,
authentic place.
yeah,
Um, but I think it's the inspiration of my own learnings. It's almost an epiphany with regard to some of the learnings around how anything from neuroplasticity to the nervous system.
yeah,
It's almost like this is kind of the vehicle which carries our ether, our soul, which
yeah,
is who we are.
mhm,
But all of these things, what's gone in can be reprogrammed.
yeah, yeah,
Neural pathways, new ones can be forged by
mhm,
way of a recognition and living alongside the older ones. But you
mm,
can go in another direction. You can retrain,
mm,
and you can almost reprogram, like with sort of some kind of AI.
yeah,
The brain, the nervous system, and we can go into that part of it. Certainly, recent learnings,
mm, mhm,
but before, yeah, I've always been a dreamer. I've always been
mm.
a seeker.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, in terms of the kind of neurobiology, it's so true what you say, isn't it? I mean, you can actually with therapy, with coaching, with self-reflect, you can actually change the architecture of your brain. I mean, you do actually create
Mm.
different neural pathways. Research is there's so much research on that, isn't there? And it's constantly being added to. I mean, that is definitely a part of it, isn't it? I guess some of these neural pathways might have been there for years, might have been created, I don't know, when people were, I don't know, 6, 10, but
Yeah.
it is possible to change them, but it does take a little bit of time.
Well, a good teacher of mine
Yeah,
explained it in simple form, which is
yeah,
essentially how I like to receive this information,
mm,
because the brain and all of its complications can be quite confusing.
yeah,
But the reality is that what has been carved out, so considering
mm,
it as a like snow mountain,
yeah,
you've carved out these neural pathways. They're really
yeah,
quite deep. You've always taken that path. Your skis have carved them out.
mm,
So
mhm,
naturally, even through a process of change, your initial reaction is to go back to that train of thought,
definitely.
but with a bit of conscious
Mm,
attention
mhm,
and logic and a bit of knowledge as well, you can eventually recognize that for what it is and start to carve new ones.
mm,
And as the snow comes down,
mm,
those deep grooves start to,
mm,
the less you use them, will fill up more with the snow, and you
definitely.
and you kind of carve out a new path.
Mm, yeah.
So that's the simple way of explaining how that sort of
Mm,
neuroplasticity works,
mm,
and that's quite an inspiration for people. They people feel
definitely.
trapped. They think there's something wrong with them. They
Yeah.
think that they're always going to be like this. Well, that's not true.
Mm,
If we talk about it and we work on it and we gain some knowledge around how this all works,
mm,
you kind of realize it's not just me. This is how our body works, and we can, and
yeah.
this is why we think like that, or this is why we act like that. And here's a new direction that we can take, but it
Mm,
takes time. Like all the best habits,
mm,
you'll notice take the longest to form.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the bad habits take seconds and you're in. Whereas but you've got to put the work in. You've got to,
Mm,
but that you've got also you need to co-regulate, and you potentially
yeah.
need someone to walk alongside you and hold your hand and
Yeah.
be a mirror while you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. We showed, I mean, that was something that you said in the introduction, really, about not, I forget exactly how you put it, but how important it is just to sit alongside somebody on their journey. And
Yeah,
I would really agree with that. I mean, yes, we have interventions and we use this and we use that, but for me, I think a lot of the time, just having somebody to really see you, hear you, and sit alongside you as you kind of move forwards into your own growth, I think is so important. Sometimes that is the only thing that is necessary. People, I
yeah,
think, I mean, my personal philosophy is that I think people, psychic systems, people, humans, I think there is a growth. People want to grow, don't they? They want to actualize, but often I think the experiences that they've had in the past stop that. And I guess when they go and see a therapist, that is the space really, with the therapist sitting alongside where they can start moving forwards.
yeah.
So I guess,
Loneliness for me is the
yeah,
killer. Connection
yeah,
is, to feel alone in all of this is just the worst.
yeah,
It's just the most unhelpful state of mind to be in. So therefore, you talked about men at the start.
mm,
Lots of men, and including myself, with regard to the world that my age kind of grew up in.
yeah,
Um, the thought of psychotherapy or the thought of mental health back then in the 80s and 90s, or certainly the 80s, but
yeah,
definitely including the 90s, was something that you didn't even think about. There was an element of the most unhelpful thing,
yeah,
cup of cold concrete and
mm,
get on with life, to sort yourself out. What's wrong with it?
mm,
And we're learning now, whether it be learning diversity or
yeah,
different states of mind, that connection and feeling like you're in it with others, not feeling so alone is the key
yeah,
to the growth. That's your base point, really. But the
yeah.
loneliness is the killer.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, so I think things are probably changing, and of course women internalize as well. This is not just men, but I think,
Mm.
but as a gender, I think men do have a tendency to kind of internalize, and that is really lonely. I mean, the sharing is so key. I mean, you talked about the group and AA at the start. I mean, opening up to one person, is helpful, but I guess, opening up to maybe a group, goodness me, it's so
Mm.
difficult to do probably for a lot of men, but really, really powerful. And I guess it normalizes the suffering a bit. I guess we can be quite lonely in our own suffering. We think it's just us,
Yeah.
everyone else is fine, which is not
Mm.
true. And then I guess in the opening up, we kind of normalize it. One would hope that a conversation would be somebody else shares their suffering, and then
Yeah.
it kind of gets normalized. I mean, yeah,
So I was going to say, I think I was speaking to someone
yeah,
earlier, and I noticed in myself that certainly while my business is at its fledgling stage, that you'll kind of gravitate to what you know. So I mentioned men there being a man.
mm,
So you kind of gravitate a little bit to knowing how a man might think,
yeah,
and gravitate to, okay, so there's a point for me to start with regard
hmm
to helping people, but also people in recovery or
hmm
at different, and then the attachment of the addiction of alcohol rather than
yeah,
all addictions. But actually, what I'm finding is at our core, and it's sort of irrespective of the landscape or the surface behavior or our sex or
mm,
um, what lies at the core is being human. So actually, our
yeah,
challenges are never that dissimilar,
no,
which is something for people to have a little bit of faith in as well, that you're not alone.
mm,
And actually, I could focus on people that need help through recovery, or I could focus on men. But actually, you
mm,
just do that initially. That's kind of a go-to while I find my feet
yeah,
in this sort
mm,
of business, or in this
hmm
journey. But the reality is there are parts common across the whole thing, whether it
yeah,
comes to
yeah,
all these human challenges. It's,
yeah.
the key is not feeling lonely, being connected, and then talking about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I mean, life is hard, isn't it? I mean, we all kind of have our challenges. I mean, I wanted to ask you a little bit around IFS. I mean, IFS
Mm.
is kind of one of the things in your toolbox, and IFS is getting big. I mean, it's massive in the States, isn't it? It's getting bigger and bigger here. Just for
Yeah.
our listeners, you don't have to go into it in any great depth particularly, but just for our listeners that don't really understand what IFS is, would you be okay if I just ask you just to give a brief idea around how that works, how you use IFS with your clients?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I've kind of
Yeah,
taken on the theory at this point,
yeah,
and but what I've witnessed is in practicality demonstrations from the guy that created it. His name is Richard Schwartz.
yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah,
American.
yeah,
I've watched demonstrations, and I've also been part of different seminars and groups now
yeah,
where I've seen other people perform demonstrations. Another um, quite a impressive psychotherapist, a guy called Frank Anderson in America.
hmm
He's great. And essentially, IFS, internal family system, is the breaking down of the parts of you
yeah,
that, like I mentioned before, on a surface level, you have different, you have a behavior or an activity, but where's that coming from? And there are different parts of you empowering that.
yeah,
And what sits beneath essentially is an exiled part of you that you're protecting.
yeah,
So there's a firefighter and there's a manager.
hmm
And a firefighter can be your reaction in the moment. So, for instance, anger, and the manager is the person just keeping an eye on things and trying to manage the situation.
hmm
And it's quite magical to watch, because on the surface, what you're dealing with are almost like alter egos. They're different versions of yourself. So someone will go within themselves with regard to a particular part of them that's showing up, that's challenged.
yeah,
And the therapist will sit there and break down the different parts and have them kind of talk to each other and gain permission
mm,
from other parts for the therapist
mm,
to talk directly to the exiled part, or the challenged part.
yeah,
And then you kind of go on a bit of a journey with regard to
mm,
reconciliation with that part, and
mm,
also a discussion around, with the firefighter, for instance, thank you for being there would be an example. You've been great. You protected me from
yeah,
the hurt that I would have felt over the years, but
yeah,
there's no need now. You don't necessarily need to be there.
yeah,
You don't need to fulfill this particular role anymore. Would you mind kind of stepping back? Um, and it kind of sounds so basic, but there's kind of magic that happens, and people will come
yeah,
out of that process,
mm,
and with essentially a calmness and a
yeah,
healing,
yeah,
that goes on. I probably haven't really done that justice with my explanation, but essentially it's a discussion between all the different parts that are acting within a moment,
yeah, yeah,
to protect what is essentially sitting beneath, which is the exile, or,
yeah,
or the
yeah,
trauma,
yeah,
or the challenge part that someone's experienced.
Yeah, and I guess so true what you say. I mean, in terms of I mean, I don't do IFS, but I do a bit of parts where, yeah, I mean, there could be a part that has been really, really helpful. If somebody has had a
Hmm.
very difficult childhood, that part might have protected them and promoted whatever coping strategy. But then at some point, I guess that part, the protection is not needed, and then that part it starts to become an impediment to their growth rather than a protection. And I guess the kind of separating off all the parts. I mean, it can be magical, actually. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody really kind of connects with that kind of way of working, but it can be. I mean, to split your psyche up and look at the different parts that are operating, some parts are in opposition, other parts not. It can
yeah.
be magical, really. The change that
And
can promote. Yeah.
and I think what sits beneath, well, and what
Yeah.
sits beneath that is a belief in the self,
Yeah.
which is kind of, sitting beneath everything, covered at times in behaviors and life experience, is the self. And IFS believes in the seven C's, which, don't ask me to reel off, but essentially
Hmm.
a courageous, a compassionate, and then five other C's, version of yourself, which
Hmm.
sits beneath anything. And all of these behaviors have kind of, they show up, um, to protect, really, to protect you from the hurt and the pain that that original trauma or that original,
Hmm.
experience gave
Hmm.
you, as whether you be a youngster or even as you've gotten older.
Yeah. And could I just, I'm conscious of the time, we're kind of running out of time. I mean, but something I always ask our guests at the end is what they do to keep themselves kind of mentally healthy. I mean, could I just ask you that for me? What do you do to keep
Mm.
yourself well?
Well, it became quite evident
Mm.
quite early on in the piece with regard to, my recovery, that there are certain things, and there's certain, habits, good habits, that I need in order to maintain my
Yeah.
sense of self away from the external noise and the world
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
And that continues even with the different challenges that might exist now. So it's very important for me to be myself, so that I might bring the best version of myself,
Yeah.
whether it be to work, or whether it be to my wife, or whether it be to relationships in
Yeah.
general in my life. So what I do, I read a book called The 5 a.m. Club a little while ago. That's kind of changed the shape of what I do.
I'm gonna make a note of that.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a belief in that you get up sort of before the world gets up,
Mm.
and you immediately get yourself into sort of 20 minutes of exercise,
Mm.
20 minutes of meditation, and 20 minutes of education, because
Yeah.
at that
Mm.
point you've kicked in your dopamine, and
Yeah.
you push back the serotonin or the cortisol, and you've cracked on with life, and you're in a good
Yeah.
zone for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, although it will probably last a bit longer than 20 minutes in the
Yeah.
mornings.
Yeah.
So I've got a bit of a routine going there, and
Mm.
meditation is really quite important at this point.
Yeah.
I went through all the different apps when I first came out of recovery, Headspace and Calm,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and eventually I've now landed at Transcendental Meditation,
Mm. Oh,
which
yeah.
was
Yeah.
a short and paid for course, and that
Yeah.
as a mantra, and that really is a
Yeah.
great reset. But for me, all of that stuff is all about bringing the best version of myself, like I say,
Mm.
to the work that I'm doing, because I'm conscious of wanting and needing to absorb this information, so that again, it can inform, um, the better help that I can bring to people.
Yeah.
And that yeah, that kind of takes on that form. And so it's important to have the different versions of yourself. They call them buckets, if you like. Make sure that you're filling those buckets. So they could be
Yeah.
social, they could be, they could be a little bit of time on your own.
Yeah.
And they can also be cognitively inspirational too. So
Mm.
yeah, podcasts are important. Make sure that you kind of, for
Yeah.
me, to make sure that I'm kind of in touch with and listening to things that inspire
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a few different things at different times.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's about balance. So for me, it's about making sure that there's balance personally, balance professionally,
Mm.
and balance in other aspects of
Mm.
life. Make sure that you're getting a bit of everything,
Mm.
and you're not tipping it. I mean, having a habit like alcohol addiction kind of informs this: too much of one
Mm.
thing. So everything in moderation,
Yeah.
is key to me. So whether that be meditation, or whether that be exercise,
Mm. Mm.
or whether that be spending time laughing, or being with my wife
Yeah,
or
yeah.
learning. It's all important. It's all about feeling like there's a forward momentum going on.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, the meditation, yeah, I mean, I do that, the exercise, I guess the interpersonal dynamic, spending time with people. I mean, these are all great things. I mean, I love that morning regime.
Mm.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you do all of the things that, well, all of the things in the morning that are really, really helpful for you for kind of physical and mental health. I mean, it's a great way to start the day.
I've
Yeah,
introduced all sorts of things, ice
yeah,
baths and
yeah. Okay,
a lot, and sauna after exercise is really quite important. I'm lucky
yeah,
enough to do
okay.
that. So that's an important part of.
Mhm.
I mean, it's good for the heart, it's good for the nervous system, it's good for
Yeah.
cognition. So there's a few things I do now, but
Mhm.
try not to tip the balance. So it's all about that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you spend all your time on your own doing stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of all about the balance, isn't it? We,
Yeah.
we, we're out of time, but I just wanted this as a last question, Paul. Is there anything that you would like to say that I've not given you the opportunity to?
No, thank you for the opportunity to come on. It's quite a surprise. I mean, as I say, I'm quite early in my journey of becoming a really long title at some point. Counselor, transformative coach, trauma-informed carer.
Mhm.
But no, thank you for having me on. I hope that my story may have resonated with someone. And other than inspirational quotes like "There's always hope," and if anybody's sitting there feeling alone in their problems, then like it's a problem aired is a problem halved. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just reach out, speak to someone. It doesn't have to be me; it could be anyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really nice place to finish. And I just want to thank you, Paul, for coming on the show. It's been fantastic. And it's been really nice to see you again.
MG,
And once again, I'd like to really thank Paul for coming on the show. Paul and I met originally a few months ago, both doing some EMDR training in London. And I got to know Paul a bit, and I really had to have him on the show. I mean, as I said during the interview, it is a well-worn path, I think, in mental health counselling and probably coaching also, that people come into it through, their own suffering and their own experience of that, and then transforming that suffering into, an occupation, a vocation, if you like, of helping others. I always think is really, really wonderful. Um, in terms of the coaching and the counselling, like Paulie's going to bring both, and I think that's an also a very, very interesting and growing area. Incorporating the coaching and the counselling, I think is therapeutic counselling, if you like. It has been called. I think it's a really, really exciting new area of incorporating, the best of both approaches. I also think it's really, really important to have guests on the show that are in recovery. We've had a few guests that are in recovery from eating disorders, and Paul is in recovery from alcohol addiction. And I think it's really important for people that are kind of, that stuck in these addictive cycles to actually see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that people can go into recovery and that people can heal from addiction. So another reason that I was really excited to have Paul on the show. If you want to check out Paul for any of the things that he offers, please do check out the show notes. We'll, as usual, have all of the links with the show notes and also alongside a YouTube channel. As I said in the intro, it has been a few months really since we've done our last episode. Had a lot going on. I've moved house. Joe has had stuff going on as well. So apologies for the wait. But we do have another interview coming up tomorrow, and I've got some more really great guests in the pipeline. I just want to do a nod to October being ADHD Awareness Month. Um, Working a lot with the neurodivergent community. I think it's very important. And I would do intend to have a guest on talking about ADHD or perhaps ADHD in October in order to celebrate ADHD Awareness Month. Um, Thank you as always for listening. If you are listening, you are enjoying the show, please do like, please do make some comments. liking and subscribing is really helpful to us. A lot of people watch podcasts and don't like or subscribe. I'm also guilty of that. But I mean, if you are enjoying the show, then please do like, please do subscribe, and please do leave some comments. Joe and I really love reading the comments. Um, so thank you as always for listening. And thank you for Paul for a really, really excellent interview. And as always, look after yourselves, look after each other, and look after the planet. And I'll see you tomorrow for our next episode. Thank you for listening.